character development here, not plot development.
Yeah, character development. So I mean, even like starting off.
So you've got to recreate the hangover. So you've already got it set up there, some of it, so that some or one of those characters could be basically not much of a drinker.
Sure.
And it's not a full conflict, it's not a big conflict. It's just little things between them that show who they are.
That's great, because just say Jack. He's reluctant to be there.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just saying that randomly. Even that in itself is a huge conflict for them starting off the weekend, right? Just so they're there. Just say Sammy, Ethan, and Tom are there to celebrate either a bachelor party or any kind of a reason. You don't really need a reason to go to Vegas. It's Las Vegas. They're there to have fun. They're there to recreate the craziness of a movie they've seen. Whatever it is, whether they cite it literally or not, doesn't matter. But yeah, Jack being reluctant is a huge burden on them. All of a sudden, he's the killjoy. He's the party pooper.
Especially if it's his car.
Yeah, sure. If he's the one calling the shots, or he's the one that's in a little more control, and he's sort of killing it for everybody else, then of course that's a huge downer for everybody. But I mean, like, it could be any number of things that create the conflict between the four of them. Because if we're doing this story, you definitely want to have the opportunity to have conflict between the four friends, because then we talk about loyalty in the other one, but what about loyalty in this one? What if they are being terrorized and they are being chased, and there's conflict between the different characters? Then there's a question of whether one might sacrifice the other in order to escape whatever is chasing them, whatever is hounding them, whatever is terrorizing them. So that in itself is room for conflict, room for story. So moving on from specific characters, we also want to talk about plot development. So right now we just have the basic premise. Okay, so we know basically what's going to happen throughout the course of the movie. But as Joe talked about in his part of the forum, three-act structure is something that is often used to talk about screenplays. And now, like Joe said, there's no hard and fast rules of you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do that. It's just sort of a guideline that will help you structure your screenplay to elicit the reaction you want from people at a certain time. So it is helpful to use that for screenplay writing. So let's say we're talking about this story still, okay, and let's just try very briefly to plot it out. I mean, based on what Joe talked about in her earlier part of the class. So we start off with the beginning, right? So the beginning is them arriving in Vegas. Okay, so that's what we call, it's called beat one. Okay, so that's them arriving in Vegas. So they arrive in Vegas. What would happen next? What would be a great idea for them to do next? Anybody have any ideas? How can they proceed in this story? They've arrived in Vegas. Let's just say the inciting incident is them. Part of it is going to be that they're being chased and they're being hounded by this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Don't you need to decide what the outer goal is and the inner desire before you do any of this?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something you should consider. I mean, I'm doing this in brief time periods. So I'm sort of, we're going over a lot of it. But I mean, that's a good point. I mean, their outer goal is obviously to survive. So whatever is chasing them, whatever is after them, whatever is terrorizing them, they're out to survive that. They're out to defeat it and hopefully come out of this weekend in Vegas alive. We're talking about the third one here.
So wouldn't their outer goal be to connect with their friends? To bond with
that's their initial goal when they're party, yes. But I mean, that's not going to be the majority of the story. Like the majority of the story, based on what I've written here, the majority of the story is them being chased through Vegas, being terrorized by whatever this mysterious being is or person is. So the outer goal at the beginning, yes, or even outer and inner goal at the beginning is, yes, let's have a party, let's enjoy ourselves, let's get to know each other's bond, whatever. But very soon as the story begins, it's going to be about surviving and living through this ordeal.
Well, early on in the film, they would have to do something to antagonize whoever is is after them.
Right.
And so the antagonist kind of has that outer goal, inner desire as well, right? Like they were just trying to have a normal day, and then these guys pissed them off because they're completely naive and trying to do this drunken thing that can only happen in movies.
Yeah, exactly. So
in
inciting incident. So yeah, I think you're right. That's a great point. So the inciting incident probably has something to do with we're going to kill two birds with one stone. Inciting incident is both them out partying, them doing what they want to do, because that's what they came here in Vegas to Vegas to do. But like you mentioned right there, it's also probably got to be something that starts the story going forward with how do they piss off this antagonist? How do they make his life miserable? How do they do something wrong to him in order for him to want to terrorize and attack them and stuff like that? So inciting incidents would probably have to do with encountering the antagonist in some way, not necessarily even not necessarily for them, not necessarily consciously. Like they don't necessarily know that they've done something to piss this person off or whatever this is off, or if it's some sort of, if it's supernatural, then maybe it's some sort of curse at the fountain in the Bellagio or something like that. I don't know. We're just spitballing. So, but thank you for that. That's a great point. And so, I mean, there are movies like that. I mean, if you see movies like, I think the Samuel L. Jackson, Ben Affleck, Changing Lanes, that film is also about two people who sort of collide at the wrong moment in both their lives and they end up antagonizing each other throughout the course of the movie. So, I mean, that's a great starting point. So, we go from the first beat, which is arriving in Vegas, to the inciting incident, encountering the antagonist and doing something in order to trigger them so this is beat 2. Sorry, it's kind of, we're writing on my part. And then we have beat 3, which would, Joe talked about the Act 1 break. So that's usually what we have as sort of beat 3. So what would be, how do we get these guys into a place where now they can't escape? So usually beat 3, the end of Act 1 is this moment where you're making a choice you're making a choice to pursue this journey, whatever journey you're on in the movie, to the very end, to see it through to the very end. So if we have beat 3, then what could it be? How can we trap them in Vegas somehow? I don't know. It could either, if we're talking about a supernatural type of story, they maybe can't escape the boundaries for some reason. They can't get off the strip, which for some people probably wouldn't be such a bad problem. That's what we're progressing in terms of the plot. Okay, and I'll want us to go through the whole thing because it might take too long. But again, I'm doing this just to illustrate what we try to get at in our workshop. We try to help everybody out with. We start off with characters. We start off with basic story. Like you mentioned, you want to talk about inner goals, outer goals for the characters, and I think that's really important. It's going to be more important in some movies than other movies. In some movies, there are, I don't know, Indiana Jones is the famous example where he doesn't have a real inner goal. I mean, he's not really personally after anything. He doesn't really change from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. If you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, and in the third one, there's a little bit more because of the stuff with his father that he does. Maybe there's some reconciliation between the two of them, but in the first movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, he's an archaeologist who runs around collecting artifacts and does that sort of throughout the movie. And in the end of the movie, he is still that person, and he hasn't really changed. It's not like he's going to change his methods. He's still the same guy, basically. So in certain movies, the outer goal and the inner goal or the inner goal is going to be less important than it is in others. And so if you have a movie that's a more serious character drama that is less plot driven, then of course, then it's going to be very important to understand that we have inner goals and or outer goals and inner desires, and how to contrast those two so that the pursuit of the outer goal may actually conflict with the pursuit of the inner desire. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about in terms of the structure of our workshop. We try to, like I said, help people from the very inception of their movie, the very beginning of the idea. Hopefully we can provide feedback on the idea that they have. And like I started with these 3 ideas, we wanted to go from 3 ideas down to 1 idea. And from that 1 idea, we want to start with who are the characters, what are they all about, what are they after, and then go through the plot sort of first in perhaps the big beats of 1 to 9, react structure, that kind of a thing. And then if some people would like to outline more detail, so there are people who like to create very, very detailed, beat by beat, small bit of action by small bit of action, outline their whole movie before they actually start writing screenplay pages. And so we try to go through that as well. And then once the screenplay writing process actually begins, then we read pages, maybe 10 pages at a time, 15 pages at a time, and just try to keep everybody on track. Try to keep whoever's writing on track. Help them understand that they have hopefully a safe place where they can have their work read and criticized fairly, and with a group of people who understand what their end goal is. Like at the beginning, you want to let everybody you're sort of workshopping with know what your end goal is. What kind of movie do you want to write? If I'm trying to write a romantic comedy, I don't want it to end up as perhaps a romantic drama. I don't want it to be overly serious. You want to have the laughs there. You want to have people respond to it in the way you want them to. So if you're writing pieces of comedy or lines that you think are hilarious, but then your friends, your workshop mates read them, they're like, I'm not really responding to this. I'm not really laughing. I'm not really enjoying this. This is actually really sad or something. Then you want to know that early on, so you don't write the whole movie and then you hand it to somebody like, well, I was really sad at the end, and you're totally surprised. Well, hopefully you wouldn't be that clueless, but I mean that's just an extreme example of what we're trying to do. What we're trying to accomplish here is that there is that immediate feedback. You read 10 pages, you read 15 pages, and then immediately you get an idea of whether somebody has responded to it the way that you would like them to respond to. And I think that's really important with any kind of writing, whether it's screenplay writing, if you're writing a novel, short story, whatever else you like to write. I mean, it's important to get people to comment on it and get feedback on it, and especially with screenplays being not something that people read regularly. I mean, people don't read screenplays regularly unless you're in the movie business. But if you're asking your friends and your family to read screenplays, most likely they will find the format foreign. I mean, if you've ever seen a screenplay, then it doesn't look like any piece of literature that you've ever read before, probably, because it's got indentations, the dialogue in the middle. Unless we're like really used to reading plays, I guess that would be the closest thing. But even then, it's pretty different. So again, the workshop is meant to be a place where you have people who are familiar with screenplays, are familiar with their structure, familiar with movies in general, have a good idea of what can be successful, what is not so successful, and we'll give you we'll listen to your ideas and give you feedback. So yes, that's really what I wanted to talk about with the